Kira is a book to show that you should not give up and have hope even in the darkest times. It shows a background of two girls having a normal life with their families and their troubles. However, the family has to bear the sadness and the loss of losing their older daughter, Lynn. I will read the part where Lynn has died, and how Dad lived on after. I watched the splotch of the sky turn red. The red spread like blood in the sea. Red, red, red. And then less and less red, until there was only blue left. I squinted as the sun rose. I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, my father was carrying me into the house. Sam walked beside us carrying the lawn chair, which seemed almost as big as he was. Inside the living room, my father laid me on my cot. She's gone, he said. I watched my father walk away. I got up and ran beside him to the doorway of the bedroom, then hesitated. My mother was weeping as she knelt by the side of the bed and leaned over my sister. My father knelt in front of the bed and enveloped Lean's hands with his arms. It was light outside now, but nobody had bothered to turn off the lamp. I stared at the lamp. The lamp was on because Lean had asked that I turn it on, but now she herself was gone. I couldn't comprehend it. I walked in slowly. My parents scarcely noticed it. My father moved to my mother and put his arms around her. Lynn looked peaceful, even beautiful, but slightly off. Her eyes were not quite closed all the way, and her mouth hung open a bit. My mother suddenly got up and held a mirror to Lynn's nose, apparently hoping to see a fog of breath on the mirror. The mirror stayed clear. Who was with her? I said. My father's voice broke as he said, nobody. That cut hard into me. I wished so badly that I had not gone out. I should have known better. I should have. I could not imagine what dying must have felt like for her. I had no idea whether it mattered or not to her that she had been alone at the exact moment she died. But I thought maybe it did matter. Then there was a frenzy of activity as my parents got ready for the funeral. Though I had hardly slept, I couldn't sleep any more that day. The lack of sleep coupled with Leanie's death made the world surreal. All day, people came and went, and I kept hearing some of them call Lean the body. Finally, I shouted at one of them, "Stop calling her that!" After that, everyone only whispered around me, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. My mother didn't want to throw anything away that had existed while Lean was still alive. Before Lean's body was taken away, my mother had cut my sister's fingernails and even her toenails and placed them in an envelope. She asked me to gather Lean's things that lay around the house. She also wanted me to make a pile of newspapers I could find before Lean died, so she could always remember what was going on in the world when Lean passed. In the afternoon, I walked in the bathroom and found my mother examining hairs she found on the floor, so that she could save those hairs she determined to belong to Lynn. Finally, my mother had me go outside and search through our garbage. She wanted to make sure there was nothing regarding Lynn that she should save. I went outside and took a bag out of our can. I poured the contents onto the driveway. I saw a neighbor watching, but I didn't care. The sun was warm on my back, but instead of feeling like complaining, I felt my mother's fervor. I felt it was very important to find Lainey's items. There were maggots in the bag. They didn't bother me, because I had a mission. The first bag was full of treasures. A paper with a scribble I recognized as Lynn's, a newspaper from a week ago, and a pencil Lynn had chewed. We searched through 3 bags full of such precious items. Before they came for Lynn, I cut off a lock of my hair and placed it in the pocket of her pajamas. But I remembered that she would wear something different than her pajamas for the cremation. So I tied the lock of my hair around her neck. Then, when Lynn was gone, I lay on her bed and cried. After I cried a while, I started to feel angry. I didn't understand why the doctor who came to make sure Lynn was dead was one of the same doctors who had been taking care of her. If he was such a good doctor, then why did she die? And I thought maybe the doctor was mistaken. My parents were mistaken. Now they had taken Lynn while she still possessed a small spark of life in her. Miracles happen. Maybe she would open her eyes later. What if my mother had held the mirror wrong and had missed Lynn's feeble breath? And yet, I knew Lynn was dead. I could feel the place inside of me where she had resided. This place was empty. It was hard to stay angry when I felt so sad. I would rather have felt angry, but instead, all I could do was sob. Even though people had been coming all over, the house seemed so lonely that I couldn't stand it. The room grew somewhat dimmer. I didn't move as it grew dimmer still. Then with a start, I hurried outside and ran to the alley and back of our house. Through a break between the buildings, I saw that the sun hung low over the horizon. I watched it until it started to hide between two trees in the distance. Then I climbed on a car and watched until only half of the sun was visible in the corridor. Then I felt a huge sickening panic inside of me and ran as hard as I could to a ladder I saw down the alley. I rushed up the ladder and climbed onto the roof of someone's garbage. I saw the sun again, a quarter of it, and then a slice, and then it disappeared. The last time ever that the sun was set on the day my sister has lived. I stood on the roof and watched the darkening sky. I heard my father calling out, "Katie, Katie." I didn't answer. I didn't want to talk to anyone. His voice grew closer and then further away. For some reason, I felt panicked again and screamed, "Dad! Daddy!" His voice grew closer. "Katie, Katie." He sounded panicked too. I hurried down the ladder and fell into his arms. I cried and cried, but he did not cry at all. We walked quietly inside for another meal of sardines and rice. Sammy ate calmly. My mother ate dodgily. My father ate politely. I didn't eat at all. "Can I fill my water glass?" said Sammy. "Yes," said my mother. He got up, pulled his chair over to the sink, and filled his glass. He limped a little as he walked to the sink. Usually his ankle was fine, but every so often, since his accident, his ankle hurt. That smoky anger I'd seen once before filled my father's face. He turned to me. I thought he was mad at me for some reason. Suddenly he stood up. "That's enough, Katie," he said. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I jumped to my feet. "You're going to show me where you found the trap that hurt Sammy," he said. "Okay, why?" "Because if it's still there, I want to throw it away." My mother stood up. "You want to what?" "You heard me. You are taking that girl out over my dead body." He seemed to consider this. Finally, he said no. So once again, I sat in the passenger seat and bumped across the fields toward where we'd held our picnic months earlier. The last time I'd been there, Lynn and I had eaten rice balls together. An animal, maybe a coyote, scrambled across the fields as we drove. I directed my father to where I thought we'd held our picnic. My father told me to wait in the car. "Be careful, Dad," I said. "I know." I sat there as the sky turned black and the air grew brisk. I closed the windows and leaned against the glass, watching my father with a flashlight on now, searching through the trees and fields. His face in the flashlights grew grim and determined, and maybe a little crazy about this thing that had hurt his son. This thing owned by a rich man who owned his dream house. He left my sight for a long time, and I got nervous and even started to feel sick in the stomach. But then his light flashed somewhere different from where I thought he was. I didn't know what good it would do if he did find the trap, but I felt glad anyway that he was looking. I like being out here better than being at home. I felt scared to return to that house where Lee no longer lived. I thought I would be so sad I would die. When he finally returned, he threw some things in the trunk and got in. If anything, he seemed angrier than before. What kind of a man puts traps like that in a field? What is he trying to catch? Squirrels? He looked at me. Squirrels? He started the car suddenly, and we lurched across the field toward Mr. Linden's house. My heart pounded as we bumped across the grass. I thought maybe my father wanted to yell at Mr. Linden. This terrified me. First of all, it was as if my father had turned into a different person. Where was my real father, who always looked before he left? Second of all, Mr. Linden was, well, he was Mr. Linden. You just couldn't go to his house and yell at him. And shouldn't we go home to take care of my mother and Sammy? We reached the private road in front of the mansion, and my father kept driving. He stopped not far from the house and opened up our trunk and pulled out a 2x4. He walked up the driveway to a red Cadillac and crashed the wood into a front windshield. The glass exploded outwards and sprinkled to the ground. I thought I saw someone peek out of the windows at this madman who was my father. My father got in as we roared away. I looked at him, but his face held no expression. Lynn once said that our father was the most determined man in the world. I remembered how she and I had seen someone act rude to our father. Later, I asked her why our father didn't hit the rude man. Lynn said that he just accepted rudeness and unfairness to him, just as he accepted hard work. If he could have, he would have worked all the time and never slept. My father was the most generous man in the world. I knew that without being telling me so. If Mr. Linden or any other man had come to our house feeling hungry, my father would have welcomed him and given the freshest fish, the hottest rice, the sweetest pastries. He would have made us be polite. He would accept anything and anyone. But for
Excuse
the
me?
first time since I'd known him, he could not accept the way his life was turning out. I watched our small town pass by. We drove right past where we should have turned to go home. We didn't stop until we were in the next town. Then my father pulled over and lay back against his car seat.